Support for this program is provided by the Foundation for Excellence in Louisiana Public Broadcasting.
Hello and welcome to Louisiana Public Square. I'm Beth Courtney.
And I'm Shauna Sanford, co-anchor of Louisiana, the state we're in. In 1920, the 19th Amendment granting women the right to vote was ratified and added to the U.S. Constitution. 16 years later, Louisiana saw its first female legislator, Doris Holland, elected to the state Senate. By 1971, Louisiana's first female African-American lawmaker, Dorothy May Taylor, joined the State House of Representatives. And by 2005, 25 women were serving at the Capitol.
And Shawn, I have to tell you, I remember when Dorothy May Taylor was there, I was covering it. And it seems that despite these gains, women are still woefully underrepresented in the legislature. Women currently account for over 50% of the state's population, but only comprise 11% of its legislative body. Since last year's elections, the number of females serving in the 2012 legislature has dropped to the same number as in 1996. Tonight, Louisiana Public Square explores why fewer women are serving and what gets left out of the deliberative process when they don't. As we consider Louisiana's legislature, where are the women? Kathleen Blanco's political career spans 24 years, beginning as one of only 5 females in the legislature in 1984. But the former governor admits she was initially a reluctant candidate.
I was politics adverse. I didn't think that public office was for me.
Only after being constantly approached by both male and female community members to run for her district's open house seat did Blanco actually entertain the idea of a political career.
People really rarely invite women to the table in politics. A lot of men are invited, a lot of men see themselves there, but they aren't looking for women.
A 2012 study by American University's Women of Politics Institute indicates that when women run for any public office, they are just as likely to win as their male counterparts. In fact, a 2008 report by the Pew Research Center found that the public rates women either better or equal to men on 7 of 8 leadership traits.
The big problem with getting women in the legislature seems to be not so much that women aren't qualified or as qualified as men, but just that women are less likely to run than men are.
Pearson Cross is director of the Political Science Department at the University of Louisiana at Lafayette. Cross says women's lack of confidence in their abilities is a primary factor in their choosing not to run for office.
They're reticent about their qualifications. You almost never hear a male candidate for a particular office go, well, I'm really worried that I may not be qualified for this position. That's not something that occurs to men. Men think, gee, I'm ready for it, you know. A woman is much more careful about those kinds of things, and in the long run, those things work against the election of women to office.
Perhaps because of that reluctance, fewer Louisiana women ran for legislative offices in 2011 than in the last 3 election cycles. Combined with term limits and redistricting, women saw their numbers drop from 23 in last year's legislature to 16 this session. The decline falls across all categories: representatives and senators, Democrats and Republicans, whites and blacks.
We're in the bottom 10 if you take the 10 states with the fewest women serving. 6 of those are southern states. Louisiana currently is the second state from the bottom in terms of having number of women serving in the legislature.
Cross says cultural differences partially account for Louisiana's low numbers, despite women making up the majority of its population.
Public attitudinal surveys tend to indicate that Southerners in particular are somewhat patriarchal, that think that women's place is in the home and that the man should lead, and that women lack essential leadership abilities that in fact men do have.
The first session I was there, a fella came up to me and said, "Would you go get me some coffee?" I said, "Well, sure, I'd be happy to go get your coffee. Take anything in it?" And no. But by the time I went and got the coffee and came back, of course someone had told him I wasn't a runner, I was a senator.
Willie Mount was just one of 3 state senators when she was elected in 1999. She ran following encouragement from residents in Lake Charles, where she served as mayor. In the 3 terms Mount served as state senator, she saw the value that having both sexes represented brought to the legislative process.
I think the balance is what's good. You know, men bring so much to the table and women do, and it's the combination or the chemistry that I could see over and over, you know, in sharing health and welfare. What good decisions and healthy decisions we made is we had a well-balanced committee.
I think you have the best decisions made when the body reflects the general population.
Nancy Landry is a Republican serving her 2nd term, representing Lafayette in the House. She feels women provide a much-needed voice at the Capitol.
Well, we are 50% of the population, and we do make laws about everything, including things that only affect women. And for example, I had a bill this session that dealt with midwives and the delivery of babies. And I just can't imagine a room full of 105 men making that decision without the input of women legislators.
Landry chose to run as a reform candidate in 2007, when term limits were bringing in new blood. A mother of preteens at the time, she credits a supportive family and geography for her ultimate decision.
I think that for women who live closer to Baton Rouge, it's a little bit easier to make the decision to serve. People who live farther away have to take more time off from their family obligations.
Another challenge women face once they do decide to run is fundraising, something State Senator Sharon Weston Broome had to overcome.
I had to learn the ropes about asking people for money. And I think that sometimes is an uncomfortable situation for many women, asking people to support them, asking people to donate money to our campaigns.
As senior member of the Louisiana Legislative Women's Caucus, Broome is supporting initiatives such as the Rutgers Center for Women in Politics Project 2012 to encourage more women to run for political office.
Sometimes that's all that a woman may need is a little nudge and a little encouragement. That seed and that thought has been there and has existed. And so they just need somebody to nurture that seed and encourage them that, hey, you can do it. Because it's been proven, statistics show that when women run for office, their ability to win is great.
Blanco says, like many women, she had created her own barriers to entering public office, something she realized at an event of all-male lawmakers she attended before running.
In that meeting, I thought, I have built a fence around my world. If I have built a fence, and I know how to do that, I can also build a gate. And I did build that gate. And it led me all the way to the most interesting gates of all, the gates at the governor's mansion.
Well, joining us in our studio to discuss women in the legislature are Baton Rouge area residents who were randomly recruited and surveyed for us by LSU's Public Policy Research Lab. We also have members from the Legislative Youth Advisory Council from New Iberia and Marksville. Welcome, everyone, to the show. It's a pleasure to have you here. We're going to review some of the survey responses. When asked who makes better political leaders, men or women, more than 3/4 of the respondents, or 77%, said men and women make equally good leaders. 10% agree that women are better, while 6% chose men. An even larger percentage, 81%, said women bring something to the legislative process that is lacking when mainly men serve, but 19% disagreed with that. When asked whether men or women involved in the political process are better at working out compromises, half of the respondents chose women. 37% felt there's no difference among the two sexes. 10% said men are the better compromisers, and 3% were unsure. When it comes to dealing with social issues such as education and health care, slightly more than half of those surveyed, 57%, gave women the nod. 40% saw no difference between men and women on those kinds of issues, while 3% were unsure. No one selected men as better at dealing with social issues. Now, despite the high marks for women, the reality is that we are underrepresented in political office. 43% said a major reason for that is that women are being held back by men. 27% did not agree with that at all. And while 23% said it's a minor factor, 7% were unsure. Despite the obstacles, a little more than half, or 58% of those surveyed, would encourage their daughter to seek political office, but 42% would not. Very interesting there. So let's start right there. Would you encourage the women in your lives to run for office? And for all of you here, would you even consider running for office yourselves? And don't be shy. I know this audience is not shy and you're ready to jump in. So what about that question? Would you encourage the women in your life to run, or would you yourself consider running for office? Daryl, let's start with you.
Wow.
You look like you just wanted to go, Daryl, I could tell.
Well, personally, I have always had that desire in the back of my mind, but timing and making sure you have the skill set or you prepare yourself to do that. And of course, like Senator Sharon Weston Broome said, finances play a big part of that. But I would encourage any woman to run for office if several things are in place with her family, also with the finances, and having the commitment to sustain public comment, public ridicule, and just having the tenacity to stay the course once you decide.
Yeah, it can be tough. I mean, and particularly in this political climate that we're in, it's going to be really interesting to hear from the legislators who are going to join us in just a little bit to get their take on all of this as well. How long have you been thinking about running?
Probably about 12 or 15 years, and several of my high school classmates have prompted me to. So now that I have an adult son, and you know, it's a very good possibility
that you might consider it.
Especially when you're a people-oriented person and public service or community service is something that drives you. I think it's in a lot of people to do that.
Susan, what are your thoughts about it?
Well, I would certainly encourage women to run, and I myself, I think I was 5 when I wanted to run for governor. My parents can testify to that. But, you know, there's so many opportunities out there for women, but, you know, I wanted to catch on what you said, that the thick skin, because women who are legislators, and quite frankly women who are leaders in any field, are treated differently by the media than men, and that's all forms of media. And so, you know, they definitely have to grow that thick skin, but you can see why a lot of women are saying, I really don't ever want the public scrutiny about my appearance or anything that women tend to get over what men get. And so I would just say, jump in there and be proud, and, you know, be ready to run. And
so, or is it something that you're still thinking about?
Absolutely.
You are? Okay,
yeah.
Fantastic. Harriet, what about you? Would you encourage the women in your life to run? Would you consider running?
Well, when I had that question asked to me on the survey, the way that it was worded was, would you encourage your daughter?
Okay.
And my response was, I wouldn't encourage my daughter to do any certain thing. I would want my daughter to do whatever she wanted to do. Not that I would discourage her from going into politics. But I think that we do need more women in politics, and I would love to be able to encourage a woman to go into politics.
What would some of your concerns be? If, let's say, your daughter came to you and said, you know, Mom, I'm really thinking about running for office. What do you think about that?
I think that I feel like a lot of women do, is that politics today is so mean and aggressive, and most of the time it's not about truth in the media, what they have to portray to the media about each other. And I think that is a big turnoff to a lot of women.
So you're saying they're willing to do anything, say anything in order to win?
Yes.
Is sort of the feeling that you have.
Right.
Right. Okay. And Keisha, I see you're nodding your head. You agree with that?
To some degree, but I believe that if you have a good support base, whether it be family, friends, co-workers, associates, that you can do it. I mean, I've always believed that, even as being in the field that I'm in, I was elected as a parliamentarian, and I never would have thought I would have been chosen, but I've always been known to be outspoken, driven to make changes and make things happen. So I push my daughter to run. Why not be the next president? Why not? So I encourage my daughter and my son as well to try.
It's so interesting. It's so interesting that you said you would never have thought that you would have been a parliamentarian. But why not? It just was not something that you really ever gave any thought to, right? And this points to a very interesting fact in doing some research for the program, the fact that when it comes to political ambition, simply put, according to this research study that was done by American University this year, men have it, women don't. Women tend to need to be pushed, which we heard in the piece that we just saw, and men tend to want to get out there and just do it for themselves. But you know, women are seen as being honest. They're seen as being smart. They're seen as being capable. So where are we missing it, Vivian? What are we missing?
When we look at the factors that lead to the gender gap on political ambition between men and women, I was struck by the fact that they seem to be the same factors, like lack of confidence, that prevent some women and girls from going into certain fields. For example, women are 50% of the college population, and yet they're underrepresented in the area of science, technology, engineering, and math. And I'm a member of a group, American Association of University Women, which does have policy directives and a strategy to try to change that. And so they provide grants to groups that are trying that are working with young girls to try to change this, because you know, the attributes of competitiveness and ambition, they have to start early. So if I were going to strategize about how to change some of these factors that contribute to the gender gap, then I'd say maybe what we need to do is start working in the middle schools and in the high schools with young women to foster the kind of knowledge about the political process, encourage them to run for student government, be editor of the newspaper, and develop the kind of critical skills that they'll need so that when they do become young adults, they can be fully participating in the elective process.
Right, the skills and the confidence. I mean, it does take confidence to put yourself out there, because that really is what you are doing. You're putting yourself out there. We've been talking about young people, and we want to hear from you, Emily, and get your thoughts on this whole issue of women and the underrepresentation of women in the political process. What's your take on it?
Okay, well, I'd like to say that I completely agree with her. The lack of confidence is amazing to look at. I don't understand, because usually people start it later. They might, like you said, women need to be pushed. They automatically don't say it was my idea to go out and say it. So I do agree with this woman by saying that you have to start early. You instill that confidence through, send them to leadership camps, programs, join your student government, your student council, be parliamentarian, or different things like that. Start it early so it builds that confidence. It builds that sense of you can have the strength and courage to withstand media when you get earlier in life, you know. So I think, yeah, if you instill confidence at an early age, then it keeps on building, and you'll have the confidence to run earlier.
Well, I would say you certainly have the confidence.
If I can add to that, chiming on Vivian's comment and both Emily, I can recall when I was in high school and had the opportunity to attend Louisiana Girls State. It was the perfect climate to kind of bring you out of your shell and to spur leadership. Of course, there was competition where you would run for the governor of your state, and you would go down to the Capitol. And it's really a shame that, well, it's Louisiana Girls State and Louisiana Boys State, and it's still been around for eons and centuries. But that was the perfect setting in my mind to basically give me the idea or create some thoughts in my mind. Well, I want to run for student council. I want to run for the school president. And then you kind of know, you're prompted, but it still goes back to that confidence. And it still goes back to having those attributes in place, even though you've been exposed to it at an early age.
I am so glad that you mentioned that. I actually participated in Louisiana Girls State, and it was fabulous. Wonderful. It was a wonderful, wonderful experience, something that I treasure to this day. But it was a great environment and a great opportunity to get girls involved and to see, hey, you can do it, and you can help each other. I mean, you get support from each other. Alexis, your thoughts on this?
My thoughts are, I think, quite different, because at my school, our student council is majority female. As far as the executive board, the people who run the student council, it's majority female. We're all female. I think we have one guy on there. So I think that between high school and that adult life, there's a change in women. I mean, as you have kids, as you get married, I think that you mellow out and you become more sensitive to your feelings. Not saying that there's a lack of confidence, it's just your confidence is elsewhere and your emotional settings are elsewhere than in the political arena.
Right. Well, you're talking about family obligations, and that, of course, is a very, very real issue for women who decide to get into political office. I mean, let's face it, women are really the ones who are having to take care of the family. I mean, your husband can get out there, but it's mom and it's the wife who's going to really run things. I think we can all agree on that, right? And the information that I came across is that when you look at the majority of women who are in political office, they're either divorced, they are widowed, they are separated, they've never been married, they either don't have children or they have older children, because it's just very, very difficult when you have those other obligations going on. Marilyn, I see you nodding your head. You agree with that?
You know, I ran for the legislature, but I had been a lobbyist. I had been a political activist for quite a while, so my confidence, that wasn't a big problem. And somebody said something about negotiation with other people in the legislature. I don't know how good I would have been at that, but I didn't have a problem doing it. And I was married, and my husband was actually the one who said, "Why don't you run?" You know. And I had a big support group of women, particularly because I was in the League of Women Voters, which was mostly women at the time, and other women's groups. But my husband says I could not ever do this because I would be, my animosity toward people who would not work with me would be so strong that I couldn't stand it, and you could do that.
Marilyn, I'm going to have to ask you to hold that thought, and we're going to continue. We have to take a quick break right now. When we return, we'll be joined by a panel of experts to further explore our topic, Louisiana's legislature. Where are the women? Stay tuned. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Louisiana Public Square. Tonight we're discussing the downward trend of female representation in the state legislature. Joining me now is our panel of experts. Representative Katrina Jackson is a Democrat from Monroe who was elected in 2011. She's a practicing attorney who serves on several committees, including Health and Welfare and Commerce. Representative Valarie Hodges is a Republican from Denham Springs who was also elected in 2011. Hodges serves on several committees, including Administration of Criminal Justice and Labor and Industrial Relations. Representative Patricia Haynes Smith is a Democrat from Baton Rouge, serving her second term in the House. A former educator, in addition to her committee assignments, Smith is chair of the Legislative Black Caucus. And Dr. Laura Badeaux is the executive director of the Louisiana Center for Women in Government at Nicholls State University. The center is one of the largest of its kind, dedicated to promoting the leadership of women in government and public service. And I just thank all of you so very much for being here tonight. We've already had a great discussion, and I know it's only going to get better from here. So thank each of you for being here tonight. And I want to ask you right off the bat, what was it to our legislators here? What was it that inspired you to go ahead and take that leap and jump into running for public office? And we'll start with you, Katrina.
Thank you. Well, I've been working as a staffer since I was 19 years old for Representative Willie Hunter. I came on board with Louisiana House of Representatives as Labor Committee attorney and served for 5 years as executive director of the Black Caucus. And so when you're working and staffing with the legislature, you find that there is a lack of representation of women in government. And you also find that your constituents back home deserve leadership, real leadership. And when this district was created, it was a new district through reapportionment. It just seemed likely that I would go home and run. And so really just to serve the people. That's what encouraged me, service to the people. And after much prayer, I decided to run.
You decided to run, and here you are.
Yes.
Representative Hodges, what about you? What was it that made you decide to go ahead and do it?
Well, like Katrina said, a lot of prayer went into it, but I've lived a life of public service for the last 25 years. We were missionaries for 11 years, and I just felt like seeing the different things. I had been campaigning for a lot of other people running for office, and I would throw my heart into it, would work very hard for conservatives to get conservatives elected, because I see what's happening in our nation. And at the encouragement of my husband and a lot of my friends, they just said, you need to do this. Stop getting everybody elected, and you need to run for yourself. So that's why.
And so you decided to do it. Representative Smith.
Well, I guess I'm different than the other two because I've been the outspoken one in my family forever and a day. And when I decided to get into politics, it was really as a write-in candidate when I lived in Ohio. Write-in candidate for school board. When I left Ohio and came back home, then I was a teacher for a while, but decided that I better go into politics again. Decided to run for the school board again. I ran twice. I won the second time around. So I've been on the political field and have enjoyed it. But my major reason for really wanting to be in politics is basically looking at being a change agent, being able to make changes. And when I came home to Louisiana, it had changed so much, but I've been gone for 18 years. And I said that I wanted to be a person coming home, not just to evolve into the climate that I was in, but to be someone that was going to be recognized and be a change agent.
And you've been fighting ever since, right?
Ever since, yes.
Dr. Badeaux, so great to have you here, and you've been there with the center there at Nicholls State, and you look at this issue of women in politics. And here we're at an all-time low here in Louisiana. This is the lowest it's been in, 30 years, I think?
Right. And I agree with everything that the representatives have said. And everything this audience has said affirms that why I'm director of the Louisiana Center for Women in Government. It was a leap to take that directorship and to go from 2 programs to 10. But promoting public service, a commitment to public service, promoting and understanding public policy and the education in public policy, responsible citizenship, political competence, helping women to learn to build allies and to understand where your resistors are. All of this is a part of the Louisiana Center for Women in Government, and it all takes a leap. That was a leap for me, and it does take faith and prayer with it, because this is a difficult job.
Well, you all had a chance to hear a lot of the comments made by our audience members here. They talked about family obligations. They talked about we talked about this whole issue of confidence, of women having the confidence to get out there and to run. And it really does take a lot of confidence, and family is a very, very big part of that. So when you look at the political climate as well, and just the negativity of it, and having to deal with that, just personally, help us to understand how hard has it been for you, being women in this political climate, dealing with the things that you are having to deal with. Representative Jackson, I mean, you're a newcomer to this, so even though you've been there, even though you've been there, I mean, this is your first time serving in this capacity. Is it what you thought it was going to be? Is it nastier than you thought it was going to be? Is it not as nasty?
It is not as nasty as the media makes it.
Okay.
Your colleagues are very respectful of you. They give you a little bit more leniency at times than they give others. And
this must be the kind of thing that happens when we're not there, because honestly, sometimes what we see, I mean, honestly, we're reporting, what we're seeing, and sometimes it is nasty what we're seeing.
We are passionate. All of us are passionate about the bills we bring. We're passionate about the constituents we represent, but that passion is there. The arguments stop on the floor for most of us. Outside of that, we're friends, we're colleagues, and we're very respectful toward each other. Sometimes people mistake our passion in arguments to mean that we're not friends afterwards. On any given day, Representative Smith and I will agree. On any given day, Representative Hodges and I will agree. But on that same day, both of them may disagree with me. We've resolved to respectfully disagree as a legislature. And we understand that although we may share similarities, being females, you may share similarities based on the district's, the district makeup and things of that nature. We also understand that we're individuals representing other people. And so that's why I say it's not as bad as it looks.
Very interesting. Vivian, your question, very interesting question, because you looked at the number of Republican women in the Republican Party versus the Democratic Party.
Well, nationally, I was citing some statistics, I believe, from the Women's Legislative Caucus, that there were, I think, nationally more Democratic women legislators than Republican. And my question to the Republican on the panel is, do you think perhaps the fact that some women view the Republican Party as being on the wrong side of women's reproductive issues might contribute to the fact that there are fewer women legislators who are Republican.
Personally, I don't know what the statistics are, but I don't think that has anything to do with it. Most of my friends are Republicans, but they say, I would never do what you do. I would never do that, because it can be intimidating. And today I lost my first amendment. It was terrible, and so I come with a little bit of sadness. Yeah. And so I think women by nature, we're not combative as men. And it is a very, but my husband said, you will be great at this job because you love to argue, And we don't like to argue, but we like to get our point across. And when we're making those points, and that's one of the things that I've been very, very shocked at, is the friendship that you can have. In fact, the person who opposed my amendment today is a close friend of mine, and we were high-fiving afterwards. And we can't let it be personal. And so I have such respect for our other representatives, especially the female ones.
But what about the whole issue of the Republican Party, though? As you're talking to young women, perhaps encouraging them to get involved in politics, I mean, do you see that there's anything in particular as to why there are fewer women Republicans in office than in the Democratic Party?
I really don't know. I don't know what the answer to that question is. I just know that women see themselves in more support roles, at least the ones that I'm around. And, I helped found our Livingston Parish Republican Women's Group, and have been involved in LPRW. And the women are active, but most of them do not want to be, we're talking about state representative roles. They don't want to be that out front with it.
They don't want to be out there.
Yeah.
Is money a factor?
Yes.
I mean, that's one of the things that I'm certainly wondering. I know in talking with progressives that it's sometimes easier for progressives to give money to women candidates because they can, see the women upholding a lot of the same things that they do. But if you go to the other side of the table, sometimes in the Republican Party, it's sometimes hard for some Republican donors to actually see women as being as effective on the table. So
what I was told by my son who works in D.C. was that people didn't think I was tough enough to withstand the campaign and tough enough to withstand the pressure of being a state legislator. And so my son was just saying, Mom, be tough, be strong. And I think that there's a fear that women might cave under issues, and I believe you're absolutely right, because that was 10 years ago when I started talking about feeling I needed to run for state representative. I was told by a very close friend of mine who was a state representative at the time, he said, I don't think that district is ready to accept a woman as a state representative. And that was a huge, talk about let the air out of me. But here I am.
Dr. Badeaux?
I was simply going to comment on that perception is reality. What your perception is reality. And not all of us have the same reality. So that is definitely a perception that women are not necessarily as strong. And on the Democratic side, it is often thought that Democrats are more passionate about social issues. And women are passionate about social issues. And so they are more likely to run and get out there to push that. And Republican women, and my observation in Louisiana has been, as you said, that they get behind a candidate that they think is going to be the strongest out there in their debate, and it's not necessarily women. They don't see women in that way.
And Mary, to answer your question, if I can call you by Mary, I couldn't see your last name. Money is an issue for any candidate. Right. If you're not chosen, I don't care if you're a male, female. Reality is this: Democrat, Republican. If you're not chosen by those who are in leadership, if you decide to run based on your small group who you've been working with and you represent, money's an issue for all of us. So it doesn't matter. The only ones that come out generally is maybe your corporation decided to back you to run. Maybe you represented an industry for years who decided to back you to run. But when you are a candidate starting out running for the people, and you're at your table with 6 people and saying, hey guys, what do you think? Some of us call our parents for the first time and say, I'm thinking about running, your spouse for the first time. And so you start off with a small group. If you're not one of those chosen candidates, money is going to be an issue.
I think one of the others is family obligations that will hinder any woman. I think you talked about it earlier. And I found that it was interesting that in the class, our first class of 2008, the number of men who chose not to run again because of the ability of them not being able to handle the legislature, their businesses, and family issues. So they did not run again. But I think more so with females, that there's always that connection, especially if you have younger children, that you have that connection to those younger children, and you want to make sure that they are the first in your life. And of course, husbands don't always encourage women to run for office. My husband wouldn't encourage me to run, but once he knew that I was on the school board and I was going to run for the legislature, so I just went home and said, I'm running, and he said, okay. But that's the way my household is. I mean, and he supports me in whatever I do, which is really good. And you've got to have that support base. So when you make that decision to go out there and put yourself out in public service, you've got to have a support base. You've got to have people standing behind you, especially your family, that will support you in whatever you do.
And Marilyn, that's something that you know firsthand, right?
Definitely.
Yeah. I ran for the legislature in 1987, and my kids were out of the home at that time. I ran against a person who had been in office 16 years, and I looked for somebody to run against him and couldn't find anybody, and my husband says, why don't you do it?
So, anyway. And so you jumped in.
Yeah.
But following on what Representative Smith said, how much do you think that is also based in a societal expectation? And there's a famous story that Representative Nancy Pelosi tells that the first time she ran, the first question she got was, who's going to take care of her children? And she was like, my oldest is a senior in high school, or my youngest is a senior in high school. They're all potty trained. How much do you think? Because they don't ask those questions of men, and nobody says, well, who's going to take care of your children to a man? So what's your thoughts on that?
You're absolutely right. And I think husbands will also have that question to ask of their wives if they have younger children. Well, how are we going to manage this, especially if the children are young? And you're right, society does put that matriarchal person there to take care of the children, to take care of the home, and even to work sometimes, So it is a question, I think, that some have had to answer and to make a decision on whether or not I want to leave that area of my home and take on another service position in public service. And oftentimes, the family will rule first.
You all talked about having a thick skin and also the perception of being assertive or aggressive. I'm kind of summarizing here. And I'm wondering about your spouses or family members being concerned about whether you have the persona to run. What about your interest in protecting your families? Is that a concern for you as a policymaker?
I'd like to tell you a story. My mother is will be 98 years old, and when I was on the school board, and she would watch the school board faithfully, and I would come home and she said, you need a bodyguard. You're going to get up there and say something and somebody's going to follow you home. So oftentimes there's that fear, but that was her concern for me. But I've always been one that if I believe in what I'm doing and I believe in what I'm saying is right, I don't have that fear. And that's the way I think most people have to get. When I stand up and talk about bills that I'm very passionate about, I believe in what I'm saying. And that belief then puts me in that position. I've been told I'm very intimidating. And I said, well, okay, grow up. But I think the most important thing is that if you think I'm intimidating, then I'm getting across something to you in what I'm saying.
What about the whole process, the whole legislative process? If we have mainly men serving in the legislatures, and this is not just a problem for Louisiana, although historically Louisiana has always had a low number of female legislators. But this is a problem nationwide that we're seeing in terms of the low numbers of women involved in the political process. But what do you think gets left out of the process when we don't have women at the table? Dr. Badeaux.
Well, women bring a different perspective to issues. We have different leadership styles. We are better at negotiation. We don't necessarily have to compromise, but we're good decision makers too. We go through the process. Not only are we caring, but we can make rational decisions, but we put them both together. It's not just an objective dollar and cents decision. The caring comes into it, but we also are more gracious at the table, and we are more inclusive in bringing people's ideas to the forefront. So we definitely need a place at the table.
Yeah,
Yes.
and I think that it was played out even from Washington's standpoint. But when you see, and you're absolutely right, we are much more inclusive. We'd like to see more diversity in whatever it is. And I'm always talking about diversity to ensure that women are represented in whatever it is we do in the legislature. But when it played out in D.C. with the funding for Planned Parenthood, I think that's what it was, Susan B. Komen, and there were no women sitting at the table.
That's right.
It was a ripple effect that had situations occur in many legislatures across the state, this country. So women began to think about the fact that men are making decisions and we're not a part of those decisions. So when you look at what we do in the legislature, it's important that we are passionate about the issues of women, but we are also inclusive, because men have wives to go home to. And if the issues affect us, they may also affect them in their home life. So I think that's very important to think about.
Can I just follow up on that a minute? Because there's no such thing as just women's issues. All issues are women's issues. And bringing women to the table, the Louisiana Center for Women in Government's National Women's Leadership Summits have brought women to the table on one of the most important issues to Louisiana: energy and the environment, and understanding that public policy and dialoguing about it with alternative energy and traditional energy. And so not just with Susan B. Komen and Planned Parenthood, but with all issues, we need a dialogue with women.
Definitely.
And so I just wanted to follow up with that, and it makes a difference.
I think that's a very interesting point, and Representative Hodges, I'd like you to get your comments on it. I mean, what do you think when you hear people talk about women's issues? A lot of times they'll refer to abortion or to equal rights or to sexual harassment, important issues, but not just women's issues. I mean, women are concerned about lots of important issues. In fact, Lindy Boggs, in her book, she said it's the economy. Women are most concerned about economics. That's what they're most concerned about. What are your thoughts about that?
And being able to provide.
Yes.
The issue that I went to the floor today is a prime example, and it was co-authored by, I think, 30 senators. But I feel very strongly about we should not be selling our ports to foreign governments, or airports, or roads. And so I argued that case that we should not allow foreign governments to do that. That's not a women's issue. It's it's an American issue. And we're Americans first and foremost. And obviously we're women, but I think what I look at the long-term effects of what my vote is going to do and what my bill is going to do and how that's going to affect my 3 grandchildren that live with me. They're 3, 4, and 6, and I'm raising them. And so it can be done, and it is a challenge, but without a wonderful husband that I have sitting over here with me, taking care of them every night, I couldn't do it without his support, but it can be done. And I think those issues are extremely important to us as women economically.
And I want to get back to that in just a few moments, but Representative Jackson, I saw you nodding your head over there when we were talking about women's issues. You must have some very strong feelings about that, trying to divide the issues along the gender gap.
I don't think you can divide any issue along the gender gap. Equal pay for women is one of the most highly debated issues during each legislative session, but it's not a women's issue. Whether or not a woman can properly provide for her family, even if she's married, or what income she brings in, becomes a familial issue to everyone. And so it's just not a women's issue. Whether or not we continue to be progressive in our movement toward narrowing our abortion issues, which Senator Broome has done a wonderful job at and been a strong advocate for as a woman. However, we have males carrying a bill. Senator Rick Ward is carrying a bill now that deals with abortions. The loss of a child in that situation it's a loss to the mother and the father. The grandmother and the grandfather who would have been expecting the child.
Right.
The brother and sister who was expecting that child. Regardless of your position on those issues, it is still a general issue. It's not just, so I can't find one issue that we've tagged in society as saying this is a women's issues, as truly being a gender issue.
And I just wanted to say my efforts in penal reform definitely are not just women issues, right. I can tell you that, but they affect the entire family structure. Right. And I'm just so pleased I've been so successful this session with 2 bills that have passed that are great bills, and I think I'm going to stay on that road because we've got to make that change in our state in order for our families to become better connected.
Right. Let's get some participation from some of our young people here who are still in school, because I know that you all have a lot of interest in what's going on in the political arena. Based on what you're hearing here, how are you feeling about getting involved or not getting involved? What are your concerns? Bridget, let's start with you.
I was just thinking when y'all were talking just now that as far as the government goes, everybody should be represented in the government, whether you're male or female, black or white, no matter what the gender, the race, or whatever it is. This is America. This is a melting pot. We should all be represented in the government, and I think it's great that you all are representing us, and I hope that more women could represent us and more diversity is brought to the government and the legislature.
And what about you? Are you feeling inspired to run?
Politics is not really my thing, but it is very interesting to hear what y'all have to say about running and the things that come along with running and the problems as well as the benefits of running.
But I think this is such a great point that you just made. She just said politics is not my thing, but politics certainly does affect your life.
Exactly.
But why is it not your thing?
Just never been really interested in that.
Because
don't have the personality for politics. I don't feel like I have the personality and the desire to be in politics, to run and to deal with the bills and the negativity and the positive. It's just that I'm not a politician. But yeah.
Yeah, it was very interesting. My producer is saying that, our former governor, Kathleen Blanco, didn't think that. Right. And look at what happened to her. So anything could happen.
And she had small children.
And she had.
Bridget, you need to come to the Louisiana Girls Leadership.
Well, Emily, tell us about that and your thoughts and your feelings about it.
Okay, well, Dr. Badeaux is sponsored by the Center of Women in Government. She sponsors the Girls Leadership Academy, and it's happened every year. And I think I went about 3 years ago. It was a phenomenal experience. It's just girls going for a week-long camp at Nicholls State University, and we learn all kinds of things. And once we're finished there, we think differently, we talk differently, we contemplate things differently, and it involves politics, but it's really just about building the character and being strong enough and having the courage to go out in the world. And if it definitely encourages you to run in politics.
Is it something that you're thinking about doing maybe one day?
Possibly.
I
love politics, so yeah, of course I'd be up for anything to run, but we'll see.
Yeah, okay, and Alexis, your thoughts?
Well, this past year I have the honor and the pleasure of serving as the president of the Louisiana Legislative Youth Advisory Council, and really holding that position, having our resolution that we produced and it passed in both the House and the Senate. I mean, that was an amazing opportunity, and it showed me that there was change. And people have always told me, you'd be great as, president or whatever it would be. And, I've always thought about it, but my thing is I would never go as make it a career. But if I saw that there was a problem, a need, a gap that I was able to fill, I'm definitely interested in filling that gap and fulfilling my obligations as a citizen to the United States, to my community, that if you see that there's a need, why not fill it, Push yourself to go above and beyond.
Well, how do you reach more students and young people out there like Bridget and Alexis and Emily? How do you do that? And what is being done to do that?
Well, the Louisiana Girls Leadership Academy is one way in which we're reaching students, and we would like to involve more organizations in in nominating students, but we go through the schools and through the counselors, through the principals, and through our leadership councils, our 7 statewide leadership councils, who nominate young people. And it's not, I know that we use the word camp, but it's 4 days of aggressive training in communications between groups that are of different cultures, of leadership, practical leadership, political competence, of decision-making analysis. And we bring you together with representatives like Katrina and Representative Hodges and Representative Smith, and you get to talk with them and network with them too. So that's one way that we start. But I just want to bring up one other group that I think has been overlooked, and that's the largest group in the nation, our baby boomers. We have to look at both the young people in promoting them now, and we need to look at the opportunities for seniors who are retiring, who've already made the mistakes and learned from them, to run for office and promote that too. And we're working on that.
And the Women's Caucus, the Legislative Women's Caucus, has been reaching out to women of all ages. We've recorded PSAs to encourage young adults to have good character, try to make sure that they're accompanied by good company everywhere they go. We are going out into the schools. My office goes to ULM, and we select student interns, and they receive class credits, and they are in our office, male and female. And in some instances, I try to encourage females at least one a semester. My district, in District 16, I'll spend every Friday in the schools at least half a day after session starting in August, just encouraging civic involvement.
And we're also encouraging STEM programs to get young people involved in the areas that they might not necessarily want to go into. But I'm one of those baby boomers, so retired, and was glad to be there to serve. But I want to touch on something Alexa said. She said that if there's a need, then she wants to be able to fill that need. And I think that even with the fact that Bridget doesn't like politics, what she might be encouraged to do is to find a niche that she can help someone else in politics. And not only that, but also becoming involved in crafting bills.
Right.
I mean, we always look for citizens to get involved in the issues that affect you and call us up and say, look, here's an opportunity for a bill. I got a call from Eric Reed, Sr. at LSU, and he said, we've got to do something about these young athletes who are dying from heart attacks. And so I have a resolution that I put in this year to have people look into the study of how young athletes are dying and what we can do about the heart disease among young high school and college athletes.
Perfect example of how you can get involved.
Getting involved. We're all on Facebook.
Yes.
I mean, just about
daily.
Even this baby boomer here is on Facebook and tries to tweet every now and then.
Before we run out of time, we've got a couple of folks who want to get in.
Sure.
Susan and then Dale. First, Susan
I would
and
say
then Dale.
one of the groups that I work with is an organization that's nonpartisan called Louisiana Women for Progress, and it's about bringing people together. I think someone made the comment about the dialogue. Having women get together over lunch and talk about the issues and talk about solutions and say, look, we may not agree on this issue, but let's have a conversation and have that transfer into, activism in government or legislation or policy, because we have that ability. And I think women, more than any group, have the ability to just sit down and say, we may disagree, but we're more alike than we seem. So that's another organization that's out there around the state.
And I kind of want to piggyback on several points that were made about behind the scenes. Some people indicated they're not upfront people. Well, Representative Jackson mentioned she started off as a legislative assistant, and then there are opportunities for researchers, for people to work and support policy institutes, whether it's a volunteer. And there, some agencies have opportunities for grassroots mobilization to talk to your legislative bodies, and that all exposes you to whether you want to go to the next step, and also gives you a sense of purpose in giving back and helping your community
and
as
knowing
well.
that there is more out there.
Definitely.
That there's lots more out there in different ways that you can get involved. Before we leave, because we've totally run out of time, I cannot believe how quickly this time has gone. We need more time. But I just want to get a feel from you all. Are you feeling more or less optimistic about women getting involved? How are you feeling? Vivian?
I'm feeling very optimistic. I'm excited about the research that is going on women's issues. I learned a lot just studying up for this show today. But I do have some concerns, and I do feel motivated, perhaps, to work with the number of initiatives that we've all talked about.
We love the motivation. We love
young
that.
women
Yes.
to encourage them and promote them to get involved in civically and run for office.
Okay, so just
To be at
overall,
the table.
so overall, you all are feeling more confident. You would say that you are feeling more confident. And to our panelists, how are you feeling? More confident about women getting involved based on what you've heard here and what you've heard from your constituents? Representative Jackson.
Well, anytime you sit down with a group that actually engages in a conversation about politics, especially when you're dealing with women in government, you become more encouraged about what you're doing. You also become more encouraged about meeting with new people and developing ideals and strategies for women to get more involved. And so I'm definitely more encouraged and more confident every day.
Representative Hodges.
Well, I'm definitely encouraged, and I think the thing that we need to communicate more than anything else is that politics is not for somebody else, that we are the government.
Right.
And that message that we are the government, and if you don't like the way the government's being run, then run for office.
Right.
It's a great
Representative
statement.
Smith.
I think that I'm very encouraged because one of the other things is we all are not going to be career politicians, and grooming someone to always come behind you is very, very important. So you always look for that person who's out there doing something in the community, and you start talking to them about what their goals are, what their ambitions are, and whether or not they'd like to run for office, and you just take them along. I think we all need to do that, and it's each one teach one, each one reach one.
Right.
So.
Dr. Badeaux.
Well, I am encouraged. If I was not encouraged, I wouldn't get up every morning and do what I do, which is difficult, and that is motivating people to run for office, to come to the workshops, to learn about public policy, to work with all these great people. If I didn't think there was a future, I wouldn't do it.
Great note to end on. We have run out of time for our question and answer segment. We'd like to thank all of our panelists, Representative Jackson, Representative Hodges, Representative Pat Smith, and Dr. Badeaux. When we come back, we'll have a few closing comments, so stay tuned.
Well, in a democracy, it certainly takes everyone being involved, right?
It certainly does, and we should get involved.
Women, too.
That's right.
Well, that's all the time we have for this edition of Louisiana Public Square. We encourage you to visit our website at lpb.org/public square. While you're there, take this month's survey and check on our resources for women considering making the leap into politics. We also encourage you to comment on tonight's show, like viewers did following last month's Education Reform 2012. Lisa writes, "While I certainly do not believe that everything in our traditional public schools is perfect, I also believe that this drastic and rushed educational overhaul was forced through." And Tricia writes, "Teachers that want tenure as job protection are simply not the kind of people we want teaching." And Dawn echoed the sentiments of many, and she said, "I just watched your show and thought your panel of experts was very biased." Well, Dawn, you know, we try and have diverse opinions here. What we tried to do in that show was show what was going to happen after all the legislation passed. So we welcome your comments, your pans as well as your praises, and we look forward to incorporating many perspectives in the future.
Well, a study published last week in the British Medical Journal predicts that taxing soft drinks would decrease America's obesity rate by nearly 4%. Junk food taxes were one of the issues discussed earlier this year on Weighty Matters, Louisiana's obesity problem. Join us next month for an encore presentation as Louisiana Public Square explores why we are the 5th most overweight state in the country. Thanks so much for watching, and have a good night.
And good night, everyone.
For a copy of this program, call 1-800-973-7246 or go online to www.lpb.org.
Support for this program is provided by the Foundation for Excellence in Louisiana Public Broadcasting.